Welcome to IM Updates. This is Yen. In this episode, we'll cover key international guideline updates, new FDA approvals, and real clinical changes in practice from April the 10th to the 17th. Here's the overview. On April the 12th, the European Heart Rhythm Association of the European Society of Cardiology, the Heart Rhythm Society, the Asia Pacific Heart Rhythm Society, the Latin American Heart Rhythm Society, and the Canadian Heart Rhythm Society jointly released a scientific statement on post-field ablation for the interventional treatment of atrial fibrillation. Post-field ablation, or PFA, is a transformative technology for atrial fibrillation ablation, offering comparable efficacy to thermal energy with significantly improved safety. This guidance provides practical recommendations on patient selection, sedation protocols, and complication management to facilitate the responsible global rollout of this technology. On April 13th, European Heart Rhythm Association and the European Association of Percutaneous Cardiovascular Interventions of the European Society of Cardiology released a scientific statement on intracardial echocardiography, or ICE, during invasive electrophysiological procedures. While ICE has evolved far beyond assisting with transeptal puncture, now it has been aiding in arrhythmia ablation, reducing procedural radiation, enabling early detection of complications, identifying infective endocarditis, and guiding endomyocardial biopsy and left atrial appendage occlusion. Although most supporting evidence comes from observational studies, the statement will serve as a practical roadmap to help clinicians maximize the technique's key benefits for sure. Next, on April the 14th, Clinical Pharmacogenetics Implementation Consortium, or CPIC, released updated guideline for CYP2D6 genotype and use of 5-hydroxytryptamine type 3 or 5-HT3 receptor antagonists. Key findings include CYP2D6 variation significantly affects metabolism and efficacy of ondansetron and trospisetron, but not granisetron. So for ultra-rapid metabolizer, there's moderate recommendation that consider alternative drug non-metabolized by CYP2D6, for example granisetron, due to increased risk of vomiting. Move on to new FDA approvals. On April the 16th, the US FDA approved a new indication for FILSPARI sparsentan tablets for reducing proteinuria in patients aged 8 years and older with focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, or FSGS, without nephrotic syndrome. This approval marks an important milestone because it provides the first FDA-approved treatments for patients living with this rare kidney condition. FILSPARI is a dual endothelin and angiotensin II receptor antagonist. It was previously approved to slow kidney function decline in adults with primary immunoglobulin A nephropathy who are at risk for disease progression. Because of the risk of hepatotoxicity, FILSPARI is available only through a restricted drug distribution program under a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy. The most common side effects of FILSPARI in patients with FSGS are peripheral edema, hypotension, hyperkalemia, dizziness, and anemia. Last but not least, the Trump administration has recently pursued a most favored nation, or MFN, pricing approach aimed at eliminating price disparities between the US and other developed nations. Different from previous Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, which seemed to cause a potential 40 to 45% reduction in post-approval oncology trials and shift away from small molecules. MFN imposes an 100% tariff on patented pharmaceutical imports with exemptions for compliant companies. On the bright side, it addresses the long-standing issue of US drug prices being significantly higher than in peer countries, and it ties pricing concessions to onshoring, potentially strengthening US pharmaceutical supply chains and national security. However, some argue that MFN pricing will reduce revenues available for R&D. Some losses may be offset by improved prioritization and efficiency, or questions whether the proposals prefigure a strategy or are merely disruptive tactics. So, what's your take on this matter? How much will patients benefit from this approach? That's all for today. Enjoy your weekend and see you next week.